When it comes to the all-time great horror surprises, it's easy to automatically think of those classic final act twists that swerved us all. However, it's not always about dropping a third act bombshell, as there's something equally as special in using an opening few minutes to give a major revelation or flip a film totally on its head. And it's on those moments that the focus is on here today. So with that in mind, I'm Andrew from What Culture Horror, and here are 10 horror movie openings that surprised us all. Number 10. Influencer. From watching the trailer for Shudder Original Influencer, we're promised a tale of someone slowly taking over a social media influencer's life. While that is what we got, what was surprising was how Influencer structured itself. Here, it's Madison as the eponymous influencer, vacationing in Thailand, presenting an insta-smiling image online of stunning sights, local delicacies, and someone living their absolute best life. In reality, Madison is bored, lonely, and spends most of her time rattling around a hotel room, missing her boyfriend, and eating a bunch of junk food. That is, until she meets CW, a friendly face who strikes up quite the friendship with Madison, very much turning Madison's frown upside down, all while CW is plotting a way to literally become Madison. What's surprising here about Influencer, on a first watch that is that Madison is taken out of the equation after the first 15 minutes or so, CW abandoning her on a remote island where Madison is left to die. From there, we switch our attention to CW as she does all she can to keep ahead of the game and maintain the illusion that Madison is still living her very best life. Number 9. Street Trash. The most recent release featured here, Ryan Kruger's loose street trash sequel, which is kinda confusingly also called Street Trash, wastes zero time in setting its stall out. The original 1987 movie that focused on the homeless people of Brooklyn being sold cheap, out-of-date booze that literally melted them from the insides out. And it featured some absolutely glorious, almost day-glow kill sequences, which is something Ryan Kruger brilliantly double downs on in his own Street Trash. Taking the action to South Africa in a future where the world has continued to go to the dogs, this time out, the liquid of the first film has been turned into a gas that turns people into ooey gooey puddles. For those thinking we'll be eased in gently here, it is the complete opposite, with Street Trash somehow surprisingly, in the best possible way, immediately showing some poor fella being experimented on, his body parts melting, his skin bubbling, all done in a way that instantly lets you know whether Street Trash, whether this one's gonna be for you or not. Number 8. Hellraiser Hellseeker. Discounting the uber-brief video cameo in Hellraiser 3, by Hellraiser Hellseeker, it'd been a whopping 14 years since Hellraiser fans had last seen franchise favourite Kirsty Cotton when she appeared back in Hellraiser 2. So when it was announced that Ashley Lawrence would be reprising that role for 2002's Hellraiser Hellseeker, anticipation, it was extremely high. For some, Kirsty was and is to Hellraiser what Laurie Strode is to Halloween, what Nancy Thompson is to Elm Street, or what Sidney Prescott is to our favourite franchise, Scream. I am joking. It's okay, no need for angry comments. Unfortunately for those same fans though, in a major shock, Kirsty is killed off in the opening act, literally barely 4 minutes into the film. That's when Kirsty and her husband Trevor, their car winds up plunging into a river, with Trevor surviving and Kirsty not. This would be the equivalent of bringing Jamie Lee Curtis back for Halloween H20, 17 years after we'd last seen Laurie in Halloween 2, just to have her killed off just 4 minutes into H20. Then again, Hellraiser Hellseeker went one better than that, or one worse depending on how you look at it, by revealing in its final moments that Trevor, he died in that opening, not Kirsty. And at Kirsty, she'd actually made a deal with Pinhead that saw her kill 5 people, which, yeah, that would be like Laurie Strode working alongside Michael at the end of H20 and killing 5 people for herself. Yeah, just awful, which is sadly a word that can be used to describe the bulk of the Hellraiser franchise. Number 7. Alien 3. Oh, Alien 3. The very first teaser trailer for this threequel literally had a voiceover that told us the action, it was gonna be heading to Earth. But of course, the various production problems tied to the film meant that Earth, that setting, was just one of many changes made to Alien 3 by the time it hit cinemas in 1992. And as part of those changes, we had the shocking, baffling off-screen deaths of Newt and Hicks, something which still continues to frustrate Alien fans all these years later. Seriously, it's been more than 30 years, and a certain section of the fanbase is still extremely pissed off, and rightly so. Now, given how Aliens ended with Newt, Hicks, Ripley, and Bishop entering hypersleep and setting a course for Earth, it was somewhat jarring to see Alien 3 instead have the group crash land on the Fury 161 Foundry, with Newt and Hicks. Their deaths was merely a footnote, lazily revealed by a few lines of dialogue and a quick computer report. It's no surprise at all that Aliens director James Cameron publicly slammed this decision, or that Alien 3 director David Fincher himself has completely disowned the film. Number 6. The Conjuring. It wasn't so much the opening minutes of The Conjuring that surprised horror hounds back in the day, it was more how the movie quickly transitioned from those Annabelle-centric minutes to something completely different. Ahead of its release, so much of the marketing and trailers for James Wan's The Conjuring had the eerie, intriguing Annabelle front and center, and even the subsequent home release of the film had Annabelle splattered all over the cover art. Heck, the posters for The Conjuring were literally Annabelle creepily watching us while she was held by an unknown figure sat on a rocking chair. So, many were led to believe that The Conjuring would revolve around this sinister possessed doll, and that's exactly what we got for the first few minutes. Then, almost out of nowhere, the film changes things up, becoming something entirely different as the Warrens find themselves tasked with helping the Perron family, with Annabelle merely a side note here. Number 5. 3 from Hell. Considering how Baby, Otis, and Captain Spaulding were seemingly shot to smithereens during the Devil's Rejects' explosive Freebird-infused finale, many were a little shocked when Rob Zombie delivered a third Firefly movie a whopping 14 years later with 3 from Hell. Obviously, the big question on everybody's lips was how exactly the trio survived that finale. Simply put, they just, miraculously survived. That was it. There was no further explanation given, just, yep, there we are. However, the 3 did now find themselves sentenced to life in prison. And the question then becomes, how will they escape and what will their next bloody rampage look like? Before you can think about that too much though, Spaulding is shockingly killed off by a lethal injection, meaning the expected 3 at the film's core didn't include Sid Haig's Twisted Clown. Instead, Richard Brake's Foxy Coltrane, he joined the action, introduced as Otis's half-brother. While this was a surprise to audiences at the time, the sad truth behind this was that Sid Haig was battling severe health issues that meant plans had to be scrapped for the legendary actor to have any major role in 3 from Hell. Sadly, Sid passed away at the age of 80 on the 21st of September 2019, just 5 days after 3 from Hell was released. Number 4. Hostel Part 2. Prior to its release in 2007, the marketing for Hostel Part 2 told us it would focus on 3 American girls whose vacationing leads them to being tormented by the nefarious elite hunting group. So when Part 2 opened up by giving us the return of Jay Hernandez's Paxton, it somewhat caught audiences off guard to see the sole survivor of that first Hostel. But hey, Paxton was a pretty likable character, so this was very much a welcome surprise. Unfortunately, that welcome surprise would soon be replaced by a more sinister one. We get to see Paxton living a secluded, paranoid life riddled by PTSD after the events of that first film, only for Paxton's girlfriend to soon find his headless corpse in their kitchen, as we're shown Paxton's decapitated head delivered to Sasha, the boss of the elite hunting group of course, making it known to audiences that yep, Hostel Part 2, it's going to be just as brutal, if not more so, as its predecessor. Number 3. A Halloween Feast. Likely the least known movie in this video, last year's A Halloween Feast is a whole lot of fun and well worth hunting down, with genre fave Lynn Lowry taking center stage as a former ballerina who descends into murderous madness in this darkly humorous horror film. While you kinda know what to expect here, the opening still manages to surprise due to how immediately and how extremely we know things aren't right with Lowry's Angela. Firstly, by her using a magnifying glass to set a bunch of bugs on fire, then using a blender to kill a goldfish, before turning her attention to her husband. A smidge fed up that he's been served meatloaf for 12 days in a row, I mean, cook your own meal dude, it's simple, plus getting Angela's wrath for smoking weed, out of nowhere Angela chops her husband's finger off with a kitchen knife, and then, well then, she makes him eat it. Yep, safe to say, A Halloween Feast certainly gets off to the races in shocking, impactful fashion. Number 2. Jason Goes to Hell, The Final Friday. Don't get it wrong, Jason Goes to Hell is an awful, awful movie. An awful Friday the 13th movie, an awful horror movie. Just an awful, awful movie. That said, this 9th Friday the 13th film does have a pretty fantastic opening sequence. An opening sequence that shockingly kills off Jason Voorhees. Well, at least the physical presence of Jason, that is. As the final Friday opens up, it's all very much paint-by-numbers formulaic stuff. There's a pretty young woman in a cabin in the Crystal Lake Woods, and wouldn't you know it, but we pick things up with her as she's about to take a shower, because of course she is. This is every bit Friday the 13th 101, and it doesn't take long before this woman's party is crashed by Jason, with the hockey mask adorned killer chasing her through the woods as we await Jason to notch up just his latest victim. In a rather brilliant slice of misdirection, we find a SWAT team lying in wait for Jason, with that would-be victim revealed to be a plant, an undercover FBI agent, all as Jason is blown to a million pieces. From there, 95% of the rest of the movie focuses on Jason's spirit being passed from person to person, by a turd-like parasite. Yep, it's horrendous. Seriously, if you've never seen Jason Goes to Hell before, just watch the first 10 minutes and then turn it off. It's horrendous. But those only 10 minutes, man? Yep, absolutely brilliant. And a total shocker upon the first watch. Number 1. Halloween. From one major horror franchise to another, the opening of John Carpenter's iconic Halloween could well be the most shocking opening in cinema history. It's maybe taken a little for granted these days, but it's worth remembering how jaw-dropping those opening moments were when you watched Halloween for the very first time. Of course, that opening sees a fantastic first-person shot that follows an unknown assailant murdering a young woman, with Carpenter and Deborah Hill setting things up absolutely perfectly. We'd learn that the girl killed was Judith Myers, but the moment that stops you in your tracks is the reveal that the killer is Judith's brother Michael, an angelic-faced 6-year-old boy. Halloween would then jump forward 15 years to the night he came home, but again, it's worth remembering just how shocking those opening few minutes were when watching this all-timer of a movie for the very first time.